Everyone knows Jonathan and Drew Scott, the Property Brothers, two of the most recognizable names in home renovation television. But there's a third Scott brother, older than the famous twins, who spent over a year of his life fighting an illness that doctors couldn't even name. This is the story most people have never heard. James Daniel Scott, known to everyone as JD, was born in 1976 near Vancouver, British Columbia, about 2 years before his twin brothers came along in 1978. The boys were raised on a horse ranch in Maple Ridge by a father who had worked as a stuntman and assistant director in film, and who also taught karate. All three brothers trained in martial arts from a young age and eventually earned black belts. But JD's childhood wasn't easy. As the oldest, he was often the one facing new challenges first, and by multiple accounts, he dealt with serious bullying growing up. Years later, as Jonathan and Drew became global stars, the family joked that JD was kept under the stairs, too good-looking, as Drew put it, to risk overshadowing his brothers. It's a light-hearted joke, but it hints at something real, a lifetime spent just outside the spotlight. When Jonathan moved to Las Vegas, JD followed. There he built an eclectic career, working as a blackjack dealer, performing as a celebrity impersonator, channeling everyone from David Bowie to Adam Lambert, and drawing on a background in comedy from his teenage years in Canada. As the Property Brothers brand expanded, JD became one of its engines. He co-founded the brothers' production company and served as creative director, hosted behind-the-scenes content and the spin-off competition show Brother vs. Brother, co-hosted a radio program, and worked as a global ambassador for the charity World Vision. He was essential to the operation, just rarely the face of it. When asked about living in his brother's shadow, JD tended to deflect the conversation entirely, often pointing out that it was actually his wife who got overlooked the most. It started subtly, a kind of mental fog that came and went, easy to write off as stress or fatigue. Around the time of Drew's wedding to Linda Fan in 2018, things escalated fast. JD experienced what felt like a heart attack, chest tightness, numbness down one arm, a racing pulse, head pressure, and an unsettling crawling sensation under his scalp. His heart, tested at the hospital, was perfectly fine. But clearly something was very wrong. A neurologist eventually linked the skull sensation to a rare condition called nummular headache, but that was just one piece of a puzzle that kept growing. The most disruptive symptom was almost unbelievable. JD developed a severe intolerance to heat. If the temperature climbed past the high 60s Fahrenheit, essentially room temperature, his skin would feel like it was burning, and he would pass out, sometimes losing days to recovery afterward. Think about what that means in practice. He couldn't leave climate-controlled spaces. He couldn't travel. An ordinary warm room became a genuine threat to his safety. He has described collapsing in all kinds of places, with moments that felt like they might be his last. What followed was an exhausting medical odyssey. Over more than a year, JD saw a rheumatologist, a radiologist, 3 different neurologists, a neurosurgeon, and an ophthalmologist. He underwent roughly half a dozen MRIs, an MRA scan, an EEG, and had blood drawn so often that one single session took 25 vials. Doctors investigated lupus and the possibility of a brain aneurysm. At one point, a radiologist said he was nearly certain there was no aneurysm, which should have been reassuring, but instead just meant another door closed with no explanation behind it. Every clear test result was, paradoxically, more bad news. Another month with no answer and no treatment plan. In July 2019, JD finally went public, posting a long video to Instagram alongside his fiancée. He explained he'd been seriously ill for 14 months and pushed back against any suggestion he might be exaggerating, pointing out that the ordeal had cost him financially as well as physically. This wasn't someone looking for sympathy, it was someone who'd been suffering quietly for over a year and needed to finally say so. At his lowest point, JD had an episode so severe he became convinced he wasn't going to survive the night. What he did next is the most gut-wrenching part of this entire story. He sat down, gathered all his passwords, wrote out instructions for his estate, and put it all into an email for his fiancée, Annalie, so she'd be able to handle everything if he didn't wake up. He survived, but surviving didn't bring him any closer to an answer. That breakthrough would come from an unexpected place and from the person who had been by his side through all of it. Annalie Bell is a celebrity makeup artist and hairstylist from Amarillo, Texas, born in 1988. She met JD in Las Vegas in 2014, and by the time his illness took hold, she was his fiancée and was working as a makeup artist on Property Brothers sets. That job turned out to be the key. While working on set, Annalie learned that one of the homeowners featured in an upcoming episode happened to be a functional medicine doctor. That chance encounter became the turning point in JD's entire medical journey. Annalie's own story adds another layer here. Years earlier, she'd endured brutal online harassment after old private content of hers was leaked, an experience she said pushed her mental health to its lowest point. She turned that experience into advocacy work around cyberbullying and mental health. When JD needed someone who understood what it was like to feel like you were drowning with no one able to help, she did. In September 2019, more than a year after the symptoms began, JD shared what doctors had finally found. There were 3 separate issues. First, a gastrointestinal infection, which was identified and treated. Second, possible fluoroquinolone toxicity, a reaction to a class of antibiotics, the fluoxetine drugs like Cipro and Levaquin, that can in rare cases cause serious nerve, muscle, and nervous system damage. JD said the timing lined up with his symptoms perfectly and urged his followers to be cautious with that entire category of medication. Third, and most alarming, acute mercury poisoning, with levels high enough that public health authorities got involved. He began treatment to remove the mercury from his system and had to cut mercury-containing fish from his diet entirely. By early November 2019, JD reported real progress, feeling close to normal for the first time in over a year, with his mercury levels already down by half after just 1 round of treatment. And then came one of the most emotionally loaded coincidences in the whole story. In that same year, on Halloween, exactly 1 year after they got engaged, JD and Annalie got married. It was a big, joyful, costume-themed wedding in Las Vegas with around 180 guests, complete with Jonathan and Drew dressed as video game characters, and Annalie making her entrance on a black horse. JD and Annalie don't have children of their own, but became an aunt and uncle when Drew and Linda welcomed their son in 2022. In a full-circle moment, Jonathan and Drew later renovated a home for JD and Annalie on an episode of Property Brothers, Forever Home. Today, JD is reportedly healthy, back to performing comedy, and still very much part of his brother's world, just usually a step out of the spotlight, the way he always has been. Except now, the people who know his story know exactly how much strength that took.